Hey, welcome to the Dog Days of Summer episode of No Prize Podcast. I am the professor, that is Lucas, and this is No Prize Podcast. So, how's the last couple of weeks been going for you, Lucas?
Let me tell you, all the news that's got me going. It's got me so that another show, the Drunken Chatson show, is spilling over into the show. It's got me drinking all over again, man.
Oh,
This
geez.
the news that we got going on. Look, if you don't want the kids to see me drinking, you might turn it off because my goodness, the stuff that has been coming out over the last couple weeks. Even the stories that they got going has got me, my goodness, and shaking my head. And I used to have hair. I used to have at least a little bit of hair. I no longer have hair, and it's all Marvel's fault. But let's try it and see how long we can go before I start cussing people out.
Well, let's actually talk about what came out this week with What If before we get
Yes,
into a lot of some of the news.
yes.
So let's talk about that a little bit because uh, I thought the What If the first episode was really really good, and I want to say the highlight of that episode is the animation, which was just unbelievable. And I want to shout out there's three different animation studios I think that created that show. It was a Flying Bark Productions, Squeeze Animation, and Blue Spirit from Australia, Canada, and France, respectively. Though this almost such like a almost photorealism to the animation that really kind of like affected my enjoyment of watching it, and that combined with the like 95% of the original actors came back to provide the voices for their characters. I thought that it really kind of pulled me in. If when I'm watching Peggy Carter and it's really Haley Atwell, or you see Bucky and it's Sebastian Stan, that really kind of helped me get pulled in and really kind of enjoy the story. Now, while I was, kind of saying, really wasn't anything new. I mean, yeah, it was cool to see Peggy instead of Steve in the suit and more like a Captain Britain type, more than Captain America. Um, but I thought it was really, really done well. What did you
Yes.
think?
I've this watched once, twice, possible three times, just to pick through the Easter eggs and what they're trying to do. And now I'm thinking, man, remember that Peggy Carter show that they had back then? Maybe they should
Yeah,
have probably did this instead of doing that whole thing, and maybe people would have had more interest in it. But it once again, look, what if it's off to a good start? I'm happy for them. Uh, so far, some of the complaints from some of the other guys I've been talking to is like, hey man, 33 minutes was kind of short, right? They were hoping for something a little bit longer,
with the
especially.
animation's
Right.
expensive, so I was expecting kind of like a half hour was about right. I kind of thought so.
Yeah, I mean, look, Disney's got the money. The operating costs aren't really going to dent them. But look, it is what we thought it was going to be. It was going to be hype. It was going to be great stuff. I once again I got to go back and watch it again to see what's going on and where, and if there's anything in there that's going to point to the future that might be interesting.
I think there might have been
Look,
the monster that came out of the portal at the end that they were fighting. That was Shumagorath, right?
I believe so. I
Yeah, I
believe
think
so,
so
and
too.
that's something that I've been talking about on the show for a while. It's something that they've been pointing that's going to be a big thing in the Marvel comic books going forward. Even in WandaVision, it showed up well, it was one of those Easter eggs in WandaVision that's been in the back in Strange Academy. So, man, once again, I liked it. I loved where it went and where it's going. Um, so let's see. Let's see, Watu, right? They said that the
Yeah,
voice for Watu was
it was Jeffrey
Jeffrey
Wright.
Wright.
Yeah.
Yep. Peggy Carter's Atwell. Steve Rogers. Was that Evans? Was that still Evans?
No, no, no. I think he's the only
So,
guy they got that didn't come back uh, for this episode. Anyway, there were a few of the actors that didn't come back for this, and of course Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and a few others. But I mean, they got Sam Jackson back. They got Jeremy
that's
Renner as
amazing.
Hawkeye in this episode.
That's
Future
amazing.
episodes. So next episode, which is the Black Panther episode, is the last work of Chadwick Boseman, and we have Chris Hemsworth coming back to do Thor. So it's really get like almost everybody, you know,
Yeah.
and with a few exceptions. Mark Ruffalo's coming back to do Hulk. So it's interesting that so many of these actors were just so like they're just happy to come back and do it, you know.
Mm.
And I'm sure the paycheck's not bad either. For to just show up and get to wear your jeans and a t-shirt, you know, and just kind of
Right. You don't
say
have to
run
work
your
out.
lines.
You don't have to work out. You don't have to
Yeah,
learn new flips or new, aerobatics and freaking
yeah.
sword joints. And
And I'm
oh yeah, so
sure
yeah, it's a good paycheck.
I'm sure the voice acting was recorded during the pandemic, so they were like happy to, to
Hmm.
like do it and like or that. Yeah, I bet they probably did it from home, because a lot of these voice actors are working from home with they have their own kind of studios
Their
doing
own
their
kind of
own
setup.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
for
So
me,
yeah, good paycheck for
yeah.
nothing.
So the good news that I think that has come out since the first episode of What If is the fact that Marvel is now working on several more animated series and hopefully using the same animation studio. And the questions, so I guess it may be a question that I have for you before we get into all the other stuff, is DC has really kind of had a stranglehold for the last 20 years on animation, with their superheroes. They all
Domination.
kind of
Absolute domination.
yeah, and the DC universe. If you want something that works in a story format, that's between live action animation, DC has owned animation. And Marvel has owned the cinema, and now it looks like Marvel is, they're going to be like, okay, so let's watch what we can do. I've found Marvel's animations, like up to 20 years ago, to kind of be a little lackluster and kind of unimaginative, um,
Right.
compared to what DC was doing. But here, uh, I just think that it dovetails perfectly with what they're doing the MCU, and it's kind of showing off a little bit of what they can do on the animation side, but also while not really, I guess, blowing a big budget on another movie, right?
Sure.
Because
Sure.
this is stuff that they can redo, they can revisit old sets, and they could just have to draw them instead of recreate them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. This is yeah. So this is going to be a shot across the bow for all that situational stuff with
yeah,
the Scarlett Johansson, right?
yeah,
We don't need actors to be successful. We could just do this animation stuff. We can switch out animators. We can switch out voices, and
yeah.
people are just going to still love it,
Yeah,
right?
you don't want to come back? We'll just find someone that sounds like you. How much of an insult is
Ooh,
that?
that is a shot, a straight shot, right?
Yeah,
But going tying it into the DC stuff. Yes, DC has been able to do that for years now. Like, oh, people are like, oh man, DC EU sucks. It's so bad and everything. Even though they've had some pretty good solo successes, as long as it's not
yeah,
part of the collective universe. But the animation stuff has been freaking great. However, like the TV series, it's hit or miss, right? Either you like Doom Patrol or you don't, or either you like Green Arrow or you don't. It's one of those. It's one of those things. But the animation has been on point, and and I think DC is just now figuring it out, and they're actually pulling some of the animation stuff into some of the comic books. So that's where that is now. Here's the problem: is that none of that stuff tends to drip into the DC EU. So
mm,
now Marvel has shown that their MCU stuff can drip into their MCU animation stuff, and it's just fine.
yeah,
So going forward, the big thing has been, we're wondering what's going to happen with the Kamala Khan stuff. We're wondering what's going to happen with the Kate Bishop stuff. the
Mhm.
Moon Girl. That's the big thing that people are wondering about.
Yeah,
Um, you know, these Strange Academy kids that are just hanging out there on the fringe that people want to see out there. There's so many projects and people that the people want to
yeah,
see that would be perfect for this animation deal.
yeah.
Uh,
And how about new properties, right? They could launch a new property and an animated version, and just be kind of testing the waters to see if it's worth
Absolutely.
spending the money on a live action joint.
Yes, so, right. Yeah, I don't think I've talked about it on this show, but I've talked about it in other circles where the big thing that they're trying to do right now is MC or excuse me, Disney is trying to cultivate the African scene, right? So there's a
Yeah,
bunch of superheroes that are out there in Africa and artists and creators, and they're trying to cultivate that into something, and they've signed contracts with those guys in order to help them out, so that someday that stuff might kind of drip into the MCU.
hmm.
They've already done that with some of the manga and animation stuff, right? They've cultivated that, and some of it's slowly dripping into the MCU. So, for instance, the new Ages of Atlas, and I forget the names of all the other new ones, but some of those have already started dripping into that. Like the one character that I forget once again I forget the names of, but some of that has already dripped. And here's the deal, um, with the Shang-Chi movie that's coming out, they're hoping all the speculators were hoping that some of that stuff shows up in Shang-Chi. Most likely will not. But now you get a second chance that if you're going to do this what if animation stuff, we better
Yeah.
start seeing some of those new characters in season two, right?
Yeah,
Moving
I
forward.
mean, if we're talking about the Agents of Alice from last year, where they introduced like a ton of new Asian heroes, um, and in a manga type style, right? So that is something that they can just kind of go down that avenue and just visit all that stuff. And you know what? That stuff, the manga type artwork is made for animation. It
Mm,
is. It just is.
absolutely.
And that's where I think a lot of those characters might actually get a foothold, as opposed to a lot of those characters debuted in an online app video game, right? That
Yeah.
we talked about maybe a year or two ago. But that's where I kind of think that where everything had been driving. I've been talking for years about characters debuting not in the comics but on platforms like this, going forward. That way, you don't really have to worry about creators, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're creating their own stuff. Um, but we could talk about creators in a few minutes. But I think that's um, I think this is the future. This is really what I've been saying for years. And eventually, one of Marvel's big thing. Marvel's last exploding character was like Deadpool, right? Um,
Yes.
and their next one is not going to be in the comics. The next big character from Marvel is going to be either debuted in the MCU or in an animated series like this, or on
Right.
Disney Plus. And that's where they're coming from now. They're not going to be appearing in the pages of the comics, which
Right.
is unfortunate. But I mean, it really is the future. So
It is. It is. And we'll get into the future of Marvel in a little bit, but because I do have some stuff lined up. But man,
yeah.
so things could have gone bad. Things went well, and it makes me definitely hopeful for the future. So what would you like to talk about next?
Well,
Oh,
I
the
mean,
creative stuff.
we could talk
Right.
about the creator stuff, because I mean, this is not a new story, but it just seems to just have legs, and you just keep seeing the same story again and again over the last couple of months. Is the creator, the way that Marvel and DC are treating the creators when it comes to their properties being created for the big screen, small screen, you name it. And this story that just came out that last week is, so I guess someone actually talked about, well, how like how much the creators are getting paid, and
Mm.
basically what it's come down to is a check for $5,000 and a ticket to the premiere of the movie, which obviously if you're looking at it at face value, slap in the face, right? I mean, we've talked we I've talked to several creators about this. We talked to Jim Starlin just last month on Outside the Panels. I've talked to Don McGregor personally a million times about his compensation for Black Panther, which I've never really talked about on this podcast or anywhere else. But these creators that are just so happy to see that their work is being portrayed on the screen, not necessarily happy with the way they're being treated by Marvel, which
Mm.
if you're talking from a corporate aspect, I mean, you kind of get that these creators, they were work for hire, blah 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 blah. So legally they're not obligated to really do anything. So
Yeah.
it's kind of unfortunate when you look at something someone created 50 years ago finally finding its way to the big screen, and we're kind of in this the same kind of loop that Siegel and Schuster were in when Superman got stolen, or not stolen, but got bought by DC, and Siegel and
They didn't
Schuster
get yeah.
died penniless.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so with the environment that we're in today, where a lot of people are out there supporting the fact that, hey man, these guys got a raw deal back then, right? When I'm sure when Jack Kirby created half the Marvel universe, that he did not think that someday that this would be $1 billion a movie industry, or $3 or $4 billion a year, and he got. I mean, well, Kirby was comfortable, even though he probably didn't get paid as much as he should have. But other writers like Don McGregor, who was so instrumental in creating a lot of the Black Panther universe, was making $160 an issue of Jungle Action.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that and he never really got any kind of compensation. Sometimes Marvel doesn't even send you like the like an omnibus. If they publish an omnibus, sometimes they don't even send you that as a compliment. um so it's interesting to get into it, and I'm like, I'm not privy to any of the contracts or anything, but uh yeah, I
Right.
think Marvel and Disney's of the mind that anything that came before they acquired Marvel, they don't owe anybody anything.
Right.
So
Yeah. And that's
you know
true, right? So
yeah.
what it comes down to is that yes, most likely the creators for some of these properties that they currently own, those creators aren't getting enough credit or not compensation, right? Is because whatever contracts that they made with the that company that they were, well, those are no longer necessarily void or whatever, and a lot of that stuff is past outside its copyright. Uh, so here's the deal. What you always got to remember, that there is a group that is all a part of, making sure that screenwriters and the like get their share. That's the Screenwriters Guild for American television, radio and television. Right? They currently have several agreements, and they actually negotiated every 2 years with the production companies. Like, hey, what's going to go on with this? And they have to, right? Because technology is ever changing, right?
Yeah.
2 years ago we didn't. Yeah, we had Netflix, but we didn't have video on demand the way we did. Yeah, we have radio, but we didn't necessarily have Spotify the way it is. Which so every 2 years you got to freaking keep going on, and freaking make sure you renegotiate it. They just renegotiated on July 2026, where it was like four of the five big major production companies, and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. So there's a difference in between television credit to what's going on with video on demand, to video on demand inside house, to video on demand that goes outside of production company house. And there's all types of things. And even screenwriters are a part of that agreement. Who's not a part of that big agreement? Creators, right? Because like you said, creators, when if you're a creator for one company and then that license gets sold to another company, that doesn't mean that that contract that you sign with them goes forward.
Yeah.
You have to re-sign it. So that's why a lot of these creators nowadays, in order to sign up with these companies, they're making sure that if I make something for you, that license goes with my license goes with me to that new company. So, for instance, I don't know if you've heard about James Tynion, who has been writing Batman for like the
Yeah.
last no what 4 or 5 years, plus Something Is Killing the Children, Department of Truth, and everything. He got sick of it, right? Because he's starting to see a lot of the stuff that he written get written into other scripts, and he's not getting any credit for it. So
Yeah.
he got pissed off and said, "You know what? I'm taking my business away from DC, and he's creating, or he's going with this other company called Substack, right?
Yeah.
As a result." And good for him, right? So that is to the heart of it, right? And people are upset about, well, no, the creators, they're still getting somewhat compensation. They're getting $5,000 for appearances at whether whatever reward show and red carpet joints, and a thank you, and that's it. Um, but that's yes, that's the business side. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But here's where I'm coming from. What about the timing of this, right? You know, I thought it was kind of spirited. So if you look at the date of this particular article, and it was apparently the Guardian that actually broke this, the timing of this is kind of weird, right? It was 9th August, right, which is 5 days prior to the third, or 4 days prior to the 13th. What happened on August 13th? Well, Disney just came out with their earnings, right?
Hmm.
The reason why that's kind of weird, well, it's not necessarily, I think it's nefarious, is because if you're doing that right before the earnings, that means that you are trying to influence investors, right? Whether investors are going to continue on with that company or not. Right before
Right.
the earnings, really, right before the earnings, how many red carpets have happened that the guys that you mentioned in this article were there?
Yeah.
Multiple red carpets. Now all of a sudden, you decided to mention this 4 days right before the earnings. Really?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's a way to influence the press, because big earnings coming out, and now we're going to show how the little guy is getting treated. Uh, it's just it's the news cycle, right? It's just the way it is.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's the little guys and everything. It's but that is the business, right?
Yeah,
There's so you know it's tough. I feel for the creators. I absolutely think they should definitely get better compensation. I
it's
agree with that. It's just that it's not necessarily with Marvel. They've got to go straight to the freaking SAG and say, "Hey, what's going on with this? Like, you guys did not include us in these licenses and these contract agreements." That's
mm,
where it really starts.
yeah. I mean, I think where it basically comes down to, they're getting kind of like a thank you as a footnote in the credits at the end, and really they should be. If you're seeing if we're watching Batman, right? You're gonna have Batman on the screen, created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Now, I mean, this we could talk about this all day long because it's been going on for decades.
Mm,
But if we're watching Black Panther, and it's a story heavily influenced by writings of Don, do you say Black Panther based on stories by Don McGregor, like right at the beginning of the movie, and then that there's some level of compensation there for that,
right.
and that to me is, I can only imagine that some of these Marvel and DC creators, when they're watching Netflix and they see Robert Kirkman's Invincible pop up, that's not like really kind of going up their ass sideways, because Kirkman and Walking Dead, and everybody knows Kirkman's responsible for that. That's you know. Uh, I mean, it's just a different contract way of doing business that Image did, versus where the creators own their own properties, versus Marvel and DC, which that's still the way of doing business for the last 100 years. Is you're selling me your property, you're creating stuff for me to use and make money off of, and your work for hire. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so I don't blame people like James Tinian for getting upset seeing their stuff and sometimes thanklessly showing up, you know,
Hmm.
and then not getting the credit or the compensation really that they deserve. Um, so I mean, it does kind of sound like maybe we're crying a little bit over spilled milk here. Um, but going forward is where I think these articles kind of show that there really does need to be some kind of compensation structure where, hey, if we use your ideas, or how about this, how about if we kind of use your likeness in a show, like we cast Owen Wilson as a Mark Runwald clone. Maybe
Hmm.
we compensate Mark Grunwald a little bit. And I know that he died over 20 years ago, but he's got a scholarship that you guys could probably contribute to.
Right.
And that's interesting stuff. But I think it's super complicated too. But it is something that I think needs to happen, and something that I think even some of these newer creators actually have these deals. Like, don't you think? Sana Amanat has some kind of sweetheart deal going for Ms. Marvel when it comes out at Disney Plus. I bet you she has a really good deal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and no, no one's heard
Yeah.
anything about that, but I'm sure she does. So,
Oh
I
man,
guess
we'll
we'll
see.
see. We'll see
We'll
when that
see.
comes out, because I know we'll be talking about it, but I want to talk about
Yeah.
it when it comes out, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, like I said, like, we could talk for the whole show about this.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
let's what's the other
Let's
news that
see.
we want to get to?
Excuse me. Oh yeah. So so I talked about the DC earnings, right?
Yeah.
That was the news. That was the interesting news that came out. They talked about a few things. They talked about the fact that, well, first of all, they said, "Hey, we had a lot of operating costs. The pandemic kind of hit us hard. We had some revenue, but the revenue was, of course, offset by the loss and everything. The most interesting thing was not necessarily what was actually in the report, but how the media portrayed it. Media portrayed it as like, well, there's this whole circle or this whole cloud of Black Widow hanging over them, but they didn't talk about Black Widow. Well, they didn't talk about Black Widow in any of the digital releases, but and if you there was a audio call, and inside that audio call, they definitely absolutely talked about Black Widow, and what they were thinking. So, for instance, the difference between the theatrical release versus the SVOD, the video on demand release.
Hmm.
And apparently, what they were one of the things they were thinking was, well, every time we had to do the theatrical release, we had to spend money for advertisement and everything, and we had already spent a lot of money for advertising just for it not to be released, right? So that was a key component of it. Plus, they were saying, well, no, the next experiment that they've got coming up is Shang-Chi.
Hmm.
Um, and they say, well, no, Shang-Chi is probably going to be one of the biggest ones that they're doing, and they're not going to do um, an SVOD release. So that was that was the thing for me, man. Like, okay. Also, oh yeah. So also,
Oh,
the Disney is going to launch in South Disney Plus is going to launch in South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. So that to me is makes it as an incentive that all these Asian centric stories that they plan on doing, especially Shang-Chi and then New Agents of Atlas that we hope that they're going to do.
right.
That's where they're going to target because I forget the name of the one cartoon that's already it's an animated movie. I think it's called Raya or something on there.
Yeah.
I think they're hoping that that'll play into it and be successful because right now it's not doing well for them at all. In
Oh, really?
fact, yeah, in fact, inside this report, they actually said there are big operating costs and losses as a result of that one. So
Hmm.
they in fact they called out three principal projects. It was the Raya, Soul, which was amazing to me.
I love that movie.
Yeah, it was
That
great.
lost money.
I lost money,
Yeah.
but the biggest loss was Cruella, right? Um, you know,
Yeah.
it, nobody asked for Cruella, but but
It's true.
there it is, right? It's out there, and I think they probably wanted people to pay money for it. I'm not paying money for Cruella. It's like, okay, how many? how many stories off the 101 Dalmatians can you make?
Yeah,
And
well, you know, well, these movies were made with budgets planning on a wide mass market release, right?
Mhm.
So, and then they just dumped them on Disney Plus. So I totally get that they were cutting their losses, really, right? So I know that I paid my whatever to see Soul, but then when we saw it, and I loved that movie, but I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to spend $30 on seeing something. We could just wait. We'll wait a few weeks. I'm sure in a
Yeah,
few weeks it'll just be free.
yeah,
And I know that there are a lot of people that are probably doing that. So
right.
you know,
And then in the meantime, like right after the earnings release, they came out with the news that there's going to be a Cruella Part Two. Um,
really.
I I don't understand this. Cruella one didn't do too well, but they're coming out with the Cruella two. All right.
Well, you know what? Now, but the Cruella 2 will probably get a mass market release, right? So they're going to say, was that just a fluke? I'm sure that's why, right? They're going to say, was this
Yeah.
just a fluke, or does this really not have legs?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So earlier Shang-Chi box office projections is that it's going to be the lowest MCU opening since the Incredible Hulk. Numbers are going. They're
well,
saying that
yeah,
yeah. Right now, box office is going to be in between 35 to 55 million. I think that's a little bit higher because. Oh, actually, no. Black Widow. I think she did 65 or something like that for the opening weekend. But this is going to be at 35 to 55 million. So that would be Thursday through Sunday of that
mm,
opening week, and it's only going to do. And actually, this is from Box Office Pro. They actually went to the numbers of why they think that is. You know, it was a combination of
yeah.
it's going to come out on Labor Day weekend, right? So
Delta,
people are going to be
uh,
barbecuing.
yeah, the Delta variant. People are staying out of movie theaters again, and yeah, I totally get it. Hopefully it won't be as bad as the original as the Incredible Hulk movie, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah. Black
And
Widow.
it's kind of a niche film, right? It
Yeah.
really it's kind of a niche film. So
Right. One of my friends last night, he was saying, there's a disturbing thing that's happening, right? Where okay, you just got this one lone guy that anybody outside of comic books doesn't know who this guy is. The normal formula for this type of stuff would be you introduce them along with some of the other characters. So you put them in, with Black Panther or even Black Widow. That would have been a great time to freaking do that. There
yeah.
would have been a China Russian connection somehow there. They didn't do that. The only really interesting connection might be Jimmy Woo, right? But nobody is
Mhm.
really like on the Jimmy Woo like that. And from what I'm saying, he's not up front and center right now. So we don't know what they're doing. So that makes sense of people. They don't know what this is. They're not freaking.
So and the thing that I can see coming with this in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure that the all the news markets are holding off on this until it comes out to see if they can maybe kill the box office on it, is basically if you were to read Master Kung Fu 50 years ago when it first debuted, it was, there was a lot of racially stereotypical stuff going on, with the four color inking where they were inking Asians as like actually yellow,
Yeah.
and in the comics, in the original comics, and they changed this for the movie, and they changed it later on too, is that his father in the comics was Fu Manchu, which is actually another property that was owned by someone else, that was created by someone else, but that was a super racially sensitive character. The villain, there was the couple of times the villains was like Yellow Claw, and there was, it was really kind of cringy if you go back and read it now.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
They used a lot of a lot of racially derogatory words, which I imagine if I imagine how offensive you might see if you were reading Luke Cage 50 years ago and saw the N word coming up,
Hmm.
which it didn't. They were smart enough to not do that. But there are Asian slur words in Master of Kung Fu almost all the time. you know. So I can imagine if someone was going to, someone's going to write an article about this in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be a shame on Marvel, you know,
Yeah.
for something they did 50 years ago, and you know, it's gonna be another one of those. So,
Yep.
uh, that's where I kind of feel like that might affect the box office a little bit on that end.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
I mean, I think Shang-Chi could actually be a really good movie. So
Yeah, I had no doubt that it'll be a good movie, but you're not gonna get people to risk their lives trying to see this movie that they have no idea about. So
yeah.
yeah. Well,
All right,
yeah, let's
I'm
take a
going to take a
break, man.
break. Yeah, let's take a
All right.
break, and then we'll actually talk some comics. This is really my favorite ad. All
High
right.
production value, man.
It is. I wish someone would make a big epic trailer like that for No Prize. Hint, Josh.
And
All right. All
no,
right. So,
I got one for a drunken chat, but it's like a good 3 or 4 seconds of me just drinking a big bottle of tequila, man. It's it's not a good
uh,
look.
I hope you didn't chug it.
Yeah, I was chugging.
Oh
I was
no.
chugging it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Hey, gotta represent.
Oh Jesus. All right, so I think this would be the very definition of a light week on from Marvel's end. Not as many books as we usually get, and not as much quality as we've been kind of accustomed to seeing. But yeah, so Fantastic Four Life Story number 3. I honestly, when I saw number 3, I was like, wait, did I miss number 2?
Yeah,
Uh, because I
yeah.
I like I couldn't remember reading it, but then like I went back and I looked and I was like, oh wait, we did get number 2, and then I reread number 2, and then I was like, wait a second, I did read number 2, so so it was one of those books that I
It
was like it kind of
feels
was
it.
stealthy.
Yeah, it should. This should be coming out weekly, right? Not monthly.
Yeah, yeah.
Because by the time the next month, I don't forgot what happened. It's not that type of book that it should be coming out monthly. Just break it out weekly and let's get it over with.
Yeah, so as compared to what I wanted to see was I don't know if you noticed the cover of the Spider-Man Shadows book that came out this week, but in the
Mm-hmm.
corner there was a new trade dress that had the question mark, and it was a what if story. So it looks like they've actually kind of turned what if into more of like an Elseworlds type kind of trade dress, which I thought
Mm,
was awesome. And I think going forward, books like this, like Fantastic Four Life Story, should actually have the what if trade dress on it, which who knows? Maybe they will. Maybe there wasn't room for it with the 60-year logo on it on this issue today. But this book is really kind of following the almost the trope established in the Spider-Man life story from last year, where it's basically each issue is taking a decade of the characters and kind of playing it out as we all know that Spider-Man and Fantastic Four created it back in the 60s, but what if they aged in real time, and what kind of stories can come out of this one?
yeah.
So
Mhm.
the only thing that really is kind of bugs me about this, and let me just shout out the creators. So written by Mark Russell, art by Sean Izaakse, color artist is Nolan Woodward with letters. If he sees Joe Caramagna, he's the hardest working man in comics, I think. The thing a little bit that confuses me, right, is the fact that they establish some relationships in these books over the course of like now 30 years now, right? I mean, because like
Yeah.
60s, 70s, 80s, right? So like characters like Victor Von Doom, where I'm supposed to believe that Victor Von Doom they worked with Reed for 30 years before he turned himself into Doctor Doom, and the kind of like the relationships like that, where other things that are believable that like Reed and Sue, where Sue's actually marginalized. Like much like she was in the Kirby run, where they
Hmm.
stay at home, take care of the kids, and stuff like that. But are we supposed to believe that over the course of 30 years that she was just continuing to do that? I think the most believable kind of story arc here is Johnny Storm, where he's kind of stuck in his bachelor type ways. But like they even make a joke here that he's pushing 40 and he's still kind of a kid, right?
Right,
Um,
right, right, right.
and especially where Johnny actually sacrifices his life at the end of this issue to save everyone is really kind of almost the only heroic moment in this whole series so far. Uh,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is kind of like they're really kind of stretching out the story to the point where it's almost unbelievable the time frame, right? But other than that, I mean, I kind of like what they're doing where they're actually like aging the characters. You actually like Reed a couple of issues ago started with the with looking fresh and new, and now he's got the white at the temples, like the classic
Mm.
Reed. um the Thing hasn't changed much. You see the dynamics changing between Reed and Sue, where they're married, and then Sue has filed divorce, and she starts up a relationship with Namor, which is loosely kind of has happened in the comic books, but here is more of makes you believe that this is more of a long-term relationship that Sue and Namor got into. Um, which kind of really squares away. Like Namor's not a villain in this. Namor's more of a of a hero because of the relationship with Sue. So it's interesting stuff. They bring out the Mad Thinker again, but then again, I'm seriously thinking, really, it's like, am I supposed to believe the Mad Thinker has really been around and trying to conquer the world for 20 years using computers? And it
Yeah.
was kind of so it was a little bit disjointed. um I'm interested in seeing how the story plays out, because what I really expected was, and even though I kind of expected one of the Fantastic Four to kick the bucket in this issue, was going forward, like what do they do in the 90s and the 2000s. I know we see like Franklin is going to be a member of the team, and kind of keep it in the family kind of thing.
Mm.
But by the time they hit the 90s or 2000s, Reed and Ben are going to be old men.
Yes,
you know
67 years old. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yep.
um it'll be interesting to see if they're going to do like a second generation type of this, and who ends up defeating Galactus, and when Galactus eventually shows up, because now we know Galactus has been showing up. He's going to be coming, and for 30 years now.
Yeah.
you know, and he's just not here. So at what point does Reed become just a crackpot where, you know, hey, man,
Yeah,
this guy's
nobody
been talking
believes
about,
him. Yeah,
yeah,
they spend all this money on him, on his crackpot theories and everything.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, just like we read in the paper all the time or online about like, oh, this asteroid is going to hit the Earth in 30 something years, and we're all just like, yeah, get out of here with that crap.
yeah,
It's going to miss us.
yeah. It's gonna come near, very near, close to us.
Yeah,
And
don't
it's
tell
all
me
right.
about something that's going to happen in 30 years. I want to live my life.
Yeah,
so, so, so to me, that this is it is it's a great concept, and it's like in this issue where they were in the 80s, and of course, so they have the Cold War, Russia and America, and the nuclear bombs and everything. So it's a good backdrop for the story, but the story seems a little really drawn out, really convoluted, and I'm really like I'm sorry, Doctor Doom is such an epic villain. I can't believe he's gonna wait 30 years to to
Yeah,
get his revenge on or take over the country or whatever. So
yeah.
it's a little far fetched for me, but they're doing what they can in the concept. So uh,
Yeah.
it's worth reading for the nostalgia of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, once again, the perfect word that you use is disjointed, right? Because
Yeah.
there were definitely other avenues that they could have used to perform this, right? So, for instance, using facts, right? So, for instance, Doctor Doom, um, he's like Latvian or something like that,
Yeah.
and you know, Latveria at this time probably should have been a part of the Soviet Union, right? And for a fact, we know that a lot of the people that helped us with our national defense were from the Soviet Union, right?
Hmm.
Because they were the experts at the time. So you should have had Dr. Doom, who was part of the Soviet Union, coming over to the U.S. to help us with our national defense and Star Wars program. That should be a part of the thing.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you had this Submariner and Sue thing going on. That was perfect because in fact that's been building up, right? So Dr. Reed, he's been so obsessed with this whole collectors thing. Sue, she's been feeling neglected, especially since '60s on to the '70s. And yeah, it finally came to the head where she's like, no, screw it, I'm going to get a divorce, right? So that's great, but the thing that should have been is okay, she's just sitting in helping Submariner. She doesn't know about the big event that they're going to, so she's just sitting and chilling. And then Johnny, he goes out to do his thing, and it should have been okay. Now that Sue isn't there to protect him with the big shield and all everything, that's the result of why he died. That should have been a big thing. That should have been a whole part of it. Uh, you know, the '80s, and I will say this, but the '80s by itself, that could have been a whole year of stuff that should have been fleshed out. Even the
Yeah.
'60s, right? There should have been a whole thing of stuff that
Yeah.
should have been fleshed out. A whole year, right? Because there's so much context of us battling back and forth in this great power competition in between us and Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, all that
Yeah.
stuff. But they just took this one little piece of bit and freaking. I mean, come on! They gave screen time, they gave panel time to freaking Howard. What was his name? The dude from the Tonight Show. I forget what his name is.
Oh, David Letterman.
Yeah, David Letterman.
Yeah.
They gave him panel time for that, but they couldn't give panel time to the stuff that was happening in Cuba, and Venezuela, and
Mm.
Iran.
Yeah.
Iran during the '80s. They forgot that. They forgot the Iran Contra thing. They didn't
Hmm.
put that in there, but they gave David Letterman freaking time. Come on now.
Well,
Another.
another thing that I'll shout out because I know that we talked about this when we reviewed Spider-Man Life Story last year was the fact that if we were going to have like go by the decades, why not get artists of the time period? If we're doing a Fantastic Four in the '80s, where's John Byrne? Bring John Byrne back to do this issue, you
Right.
know, or the '90s, and I'm not gonna, of course, the '90s artists of Fantastic Four, but Paul Ryan and Mike Wieringo, they're both passed away. But I mean, you could find other artists that worked on some issues there. Um, it would be, I think, more of a nostalgic kind of throwback than it is here, where you're basically just using the decade as a backdrop for the story, as
Right.
opposed to the art. So,
Yeah, the art. Yeah, the art was a disappointment. It just didn't have that '80s vibe at all, right?
mm,
No, they try to throw little things in here like the Walkman and the old TVs and the clothing, which was a big failure, right? It just
right, right.
it didn't feel '80s at all, man. It never made me freaking harken back to the '80s, man. So I was like,
Yeah, I mean that was all supposed to elicit a chuckle, I think. With Johnny Storm with the Walkman and the high top sneakers and stuff like that. It is what it is, but you
yeah,
know. So yeah, I think for this issue, if you're feeling nostalgic, pick it up. I mean, I kind of like the format. I imagine we'll probably see what Captain America. Well, no, I don't. Well, because Captain America is the man out of time, so we won't see that. But
right.
you might see Iron Man. We might see Iron Man life story. That would be I guess pretty cool.
Sure.
Or X-Men life story, that would be cool too, to see like a 50-year history of the X-Men.
Give me Black Widow.
Yeah,
Give me a Black
yeah,
Widow life story.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. So that
You
was
know?
it's the format's good. So I'm sure we'll see more. Or the Hulk would be cool. So
Yeah.
all right, so let's move on. I know that there's a couple of other interesting tidbits. We have the Runaways, which who knew that the Runaways was closing in on issue 100 of Life
I
of Legacy.
didn't.
If you go
I
legacy
did not.
numbering, I know that and this was I used to make Johnny read Runaways every once in a while because I like the book, and I know it's not his cup of tea. But this book is really kind of stealthy good. It's not really what I would call a mainstream type book. This book reminds me of a lot like what the X-Men used to be 50 years ago, where the X-Men kind of existed in their own bubble and their own kind of part of the Marvel universe, and never shall anybody touch them, especially when Claremont was doing them. No one uses the Runaways in their books. You don't see them guest starring anywhere. They're just always right here in Runaways.
Yeah.
And Rainbow Rowell has been writing this iteration of Runaways since it launched. She hasn't gone anywhere. Andre Genelais, the artwork, has basically been on the book since it relaunched. We have color artist Dee Kniff and VC's Joe Caramagna. On lettering. This book really kind of is not a ton of action ever really going on in this book. It's a very character driven story, and
It's young adult,
it is
right?
it's young adult. There's it's a lot of relationship, a lot of soap opera type stuff. But it's really good. If you read it, you
Mhm.
kind of really get sucked in, and you really kind of enjoy the characters and their journeys. And here, um, you kind of get Gertie, the character of Gertie has her. She's actually come back. There's two Gerties in this book. There's
Mhm.
a future Gertie and a present Gertie, and Gertie has come back to rescue Chase. And I guess that's the story here is that apparently in the future, something happens and Chase becomes a villain, and Gertie, who in the present time is in a relationship with Chase, there's kind of a love triangle going on with a couple of characters, where Chase, is a good guy here, bad guy in the future. It's kind of the format for the book, right? With all the
Yeah.
with the Runaways all being children of former like supervillains.
Right. Right. Right.
So this book really, I can't really kind of get into like all the stuff that's going on in this book, but it's really a character driven drama, and this actually reads almost like a final issue, even though it's not the final issue. But if you
Right.
follow through the story, the different characters, that kind of the storylines are all coming to a head. We have Carolina and Nico's relationship with Carolina's mom, coming back from the different planet, because Caroline is an alien, which you really can't tell. But they're coming back to bring her back to their planet. So she leaves at the end of this issue to go back, and she wants to take Nico with her. So both of them leave, and then Chase gets sucked back into the future. So present Chase is now in the future with future Gertie, and so it leaves the rest of the characters kind of sitting on their hands. And it does kind of read like they break up the team, which you haven't seen. Like, they've never really broken up the team before. And so here it just kind of reads like, well, this is it, but we know that it's not. And
Right.
from everything I've read about Rainbow Rowell, she just loves this book and she wants to read it forever. So
Right.
um, I enjoy this book. I recommend it super highly for anybody that likes that maybe prefers character driven story over action,
Mm.
and consistent artwork. I don't want to say the art's great, but it's consistent.
Mm.
So you know the character, you know who the characters are. The characters look like the characters every issue. It's really um, it's really interesting. So if you've caught Runaways on TV, the couple of seasons that they were on, I think Hulu, um, it is really kind of that type of young adult. I hate to use the word, but almost like wokish kind of writing, and
Sure.
the uh, it's interesting, and they kind of and they are fringy Marvel universe, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
they're there. There's sometimes you see a Skrull, which you see at the end of this issue, but for the most part, they're in their own little universe, and you never really see them interacting with anybody.
Yes,
So
sir.
so I enjoy this book. Did you just read this because I said I wanted to talk about it, or do you read Runaways on a regular basis?
I mean, I try to read every single one of these, to look for new appearances and all that other stuff. But
Yeah.
I've consistently Runaways has been good. Or at least it is what it is, right? They don't really have bad issues. They just have issues that is what is Runaways. And I consider Runaways to be one of those great comic books that a lot of other comic books are missing, right? So
Hmm.
these are teenagers, right? So they're not perfect yet. They are growing, they are evolving, right? Each and every single one of these has this quirk about them, right?
Yeah.
Even one of the big main characters, I think his name is Chas. Is it Chase? Yeah, it is
Chase.
Chase,
Yeah.
right? Who's supposed to be the papa of the group, right? But he's not fully evolved enough to take accountability and to do what this group needs to do, right? Or to push
Yeah.
these guys in a way that they need to be. Even the one that is all powerful, right? She's actually sick, right? So she actually has to go away to another place to get healed. So in order to live, she actually has to, in effect, break up the freaking group,
Hmm.
right? So that is another element that is just amazing that they're putting that into this, right? They're great by themselves. They're great amongst each other, but in order to survive, in order to go forward, they actually had to break up, and that's a great narrative point to put in there. But overall, once again, if you're a young adult and you're looking through definitely if you can pick up this thing. Uh, and you mentioned the TV show. Yeah, the TV show was good, but it's not on fire, right? There's
Hmm.
there's 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 another level that the Runaways needs to go to, and I can see each and every single one of these characters that someday be big characters on their own. It's just that they're not there yet, and Runaways hopefully is going to expand them to that territory. So yeah, man, there's just so much I can say about this and go on and on, but
Well, this is when I see this book and I see that I mean, this book has had legs over the. I mean, we're up to 100 issues, so it's been around for a good 10 years. This when I see other books like America Chavez, or I see um, like a Kate Bishop Hawkeye book, or something pointed at young adults, but more. Like I said, I hate using the word woke, but that's the word that that's kind of the word that I think fits, right? But this is the one that I think is done right, right? I mean, and
Mm,
when I read America, which also came out this week, which is why I'm saying it. It's like I wish that I'm like, man, I wish this book was more like Runaways, you know,
mm,
where it was more focused on the overall story driven, as opposed to where I feel like a book like America just kind of hits me over the head with the diversity of it. And this book
right,
is naturally diverse, where you just read it and they're that the kids are all they're all from all walks of life, and they're doing what they do, and the story's the story. This
right,
I think a lot of the other books are coming out that are just let's see how hard we can hit you on the head with the diversity stick,
right,
but
and
this book has been doing what it does for 10 years. So this is why I would recommend this book over any of the other stuff that's coming out aimed at the young adults.
right, and by woke, I
Yeah.
think the thing to put out there is that for instance, in the Miles Morales world as well, these characters,
Yeah.
what gets annoying is they wake up saying soy Latino, I'm black. They wake up, I'm black, soy Latino. They and it's unnatural the way they remind you of their cultural diversity. It's very unnatural.
Right.
Here, they just are who they are. They don't
It
need to
is.
remind
Yeah.
you. They don't need to remind you that one of them is Latino. They don't need to, the other one doesn't need to remind you that she's Asian. The other one doesn't. Yes, there are people who have diverse sexuality and genders in here, um, but it's natural. It's more
Right.
romantic and natural. And there's hey, we are in love, and as a result of that love, that makes this complication over here.
Right.
That's perfect.
Right.
That's
That's a.
yeah, yeah.
It's like every X-Men book out there right now is we're not just mutants, we're gay mutants or something, something like that, and it used to be the mutant part was what made you diverse, right? And
Mhm,
now it's it is the story of like, you know I only I can't just make it in the world. uh I have to make it in the world as a mutant. I have to make it in the world as a transgender mutant or something.
mhm. Yeah.
It's more of like it's like an identity on top of an identity where like I said, Runaways is the story, and these different diverse characters interact within the story, as
Mhm.
opposed to their the diversity being the story, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
Yeah. So yeah, you're right.
yeah, but
So
100%, 100 issue number 100. Go find the other 99, man. They're really really good, uh, and I think we've reviewed Runaways a few times. Anybody that picks up Runaways, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much you like the book.
sir.
That's the biggest recommendation that I can give.
Well, would you? How about would you recommend this one? Would you recommend Daredevil?
Man, I always recommend Daredevil. Zdarsky and Chichetto's book, man. This book is on all cylinders, and we just talked about this in the last episode because this has only been 2 weeks between issues. I can't believe how good this book is, and look at that cover, man. It's fucking excuse my French. The flames coming from the horns. Come on, this book is fire right now. This book is the best book Marvel's putting out right now. This and Immortal Hulk. But Daredevil is has been so consistent over the last year and a half. It's just been good. The story has just pulled you in and not let you go. The playing on, and like we've seen the story before, right?
Mhm.
The hero gets replaced by a gender switch, so now Elektra is running around as Daredevil, but that hasn't stopped Matt from being Daredevil in prison. But this is a different kind of a switch where the surprise at the end of this issue, where Daredevil now is apparently running the prison, and it looks like he started a riot. But we all know that there's some other different thing going on here. But
Mhm.
seeing Elektra taking on 3 different clones of Bullseye, seeing the Kingpin in the background with his little machinations and what have you, you find out that Kingpin was responsible for cloning Bullseye, and that of course Bullseye got away from Kingpin, and now it's Kingpin's job to kind of bring Bullpen back in, Bullseye back in. Um, this book is really, there's so many different threads going on, but you realize how tightly woven the book is, just because every switch of scene, every character driven narrative is just so tight, and that when it ends, like I don't know how it's going to end. I
Yeah.
know
Right.
eventually
Right.
eventually we'll be back to zero, right? Matt will be back as Daredevil, Elektra will be Elektra. I know that that's how it's going to end, but it's got me. It's got me right now. And I can't wait for the next issue. I was so surprised that I didn't know it was two. We were getting 2 of them this month, but when I saw this come through my pull list, and I was like, oh, we just read it 2 weeks ago, and now we're going to talk about it again.
Yes,
I was
sir.
like, Oh, I can't get enough of it right now. Um, but hey, man, Zdarsky deserves all the credit in the world because how tough is it to take a character that's been around this long and trying to do a story that seems original, but you know, I mean, I know we've read this kind of stuff before, but
You
this
know where?
it feels
Well, here's
new.
here's the deal. You know where I've seen this stuff before? In Mexican telenovelas. The
Okay,
main character goes to prison. Now, main character always goes to prison. Always.
okay,
Every single time, right? And then there's this unrequited love in between the main character and his love, and his love is trying to keep everything afloat while he's in prison and everything, right? And then there's always the twin brother or the brother that he never knew that he had, or that nobody knew that he had, that's switching places with him as well and making his life bad and all this other type of stuff, right? And then there's always the antagonist, right? Who's always on some other bullshit, right? But of course, eventually we'll love the antagonist as well, right? Because he's doing what he's got to do. He's a jackass, right? But he's not a total jackass and everything. So yeah, that's total. This is a man. Chip Zdarsky, come out of the closet, man. You've been watching Mexican telenovelas. I know you. Stop the lie. It's okay, man. Me and you, man. Me and you. La Pasión del Amor, man. Yeah, I know. I know that's what you're watching, man. And then even some of the stuff, the scenes, the panels. Mark the channel. I know what you've been watching too, man. You've been sitting right there on the couch, right next to Chip Zdarsky. You're like, hey, man, this would be a great freaking Daredevil. Yeah, I know you. Freaking, you need to give your money back to Juan Gabriel, man. Stop the lie. But good stuff, man.
if you're not reading Daredevil, what's wrong with you? That's basically what we're coming down to. That's you should be going back, get every Zdarsky Daredevil that you can. It's
Yep,
just he has built the mythos, and it just feels, it just feels like this is the best. This is the best run on Daredevil since Frank Miller. And that's saying a lot. So
sir. All right, let's go do some honorable mentions. Avengers Tech on number one.
ah,
Yeah, already had these armor things that's out there, but this was the first one that I saw. The Wolverine had his own type of armor. Uh, Captain Marvel number 31, first appearance of the Sludge. Right. It was a weird one, but the cover that by India Lee, absolutely freaking beautiful, and I think that was like a 1 to 50, or either it was a 1 to 50 or 1 to 100, maybe a
that's a
one to
great
50.
cover that I haven't seen yet. So that's
Yes, it's very expensive, but I had to leverage some of our customers. I had to
oh, look
have
at
it.
that.
I had to have it, man. I had to have it, man.
It's
The
a
wife
nice
was going to kill
cover.
me when she sees the bank statement, but yeah, we just had to have it. Uh, Miles Morales number 21, new suit, right? We've been talking about this for a while. That he was getting a new suit.
Do you
A
like
lot
the
of
new
people don't
suit?
like it. A lot of people don't like it, man. A lot of people are saying, it looks like it's by, it was influenced by some rapper or something like that. And it's like, whatever. But I think even more important, first appearance. Once again, this is not Ship's first appearance, but this is the first time he appears without the Miles Morales suit on him.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then let's see, what else? What else? What else? What else? Doctor Bloodroot, X Force number 22. He's got some beef with the X Force because of something that happened with his wife. Apparently,
Is that his first appearance, or did he appear in the previous issue of X Force?
uh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm jacked up. But I thought that was kind of interesting. I did like the story of what was going on.
Yeah.
The whole thing with and you know what? In fact, you are right. He did appear in the previous one because there was a whole bunch of different ones that were running around.
And there was a
The
plant. There was a plant guy in this issue, Manslaughter, that looked a lot like. He
no
was like a
man thing.
cross
Yeah, man.
between Man Thing and Swamp Thing.
Exactly right. Even what was the name of the one guy from the '80s that always had the Gatling gun as well? There's one that's out there.
I can't even remember.
The Swamp Avenger or something like that. Um, but the interesting thing about Bloodroot is that it looks like he may have an ancestor because the Mighty Thor Number 13, there was a Roblet root who has a connection to Yggdrasil, or the tree that goes in through Vanaheim and Thorenheim and all that other stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But they were able to contain him, but they're saying he's probably not dead, so he's probably lurking out there somewhere.
Hmm.
The Hellions number 14. This one was from last week. There is a new Omega mutant that's out there. Once again, this is another cover by Inhyuk Lee. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Um, I haven't gotten this one yet, but I'm going to be hunting for it on a cheap. And this was the big scandal from this week. Credit to Comics Main and Ninth Wonder for
Wait,
breaking this.
why is this scandal?
Because so those Walmart packs, right?
Yeah.
Usually you're supposed to be able to get you were supposed to be able to get maybe like second, third prints. Well, it's not just second and third prints. There are like 1 to 50s, 1 to 100s, and these $8 freaking packs. It's a scandal because no retailers they're buying 50 comic books or 100. I think somebody found like 1 to 1,000. So in order to get that 1 to 1,000, you had to buy 1,000 freaking comic books. And here
And
you are.
that's that amazing Spider-Man cover, right?
So that Amazing Spider-Man cover, that's the Patrick Gleason. That one's actually just 1 to 25.
Oh, okay, but I mean
Um,
that is that the variant cover?
yes, sir.
And
That is an
what's the other
exclusive.
cover? The X of Swords cover?
Yes, the Access Sword cover. That's a 1 to 10. The one next to it to the right, that's the Star Wars High Republic stores are 1 to 25s, and I forget what the nonstop Spider-Man is. It might be like a
Wow.
1 to 50 or
So now
something.
these are available at Walmart.
Yes, sir. So a bunch of people are running out to the local WalMarts to freaking buy some packs and see what's in them. Apparently, if you find any of the Star Wars High Republic packs, those are where those are at. Um, but
Huh.
and that's one thing, right? It's okay. Say okay, retailers send us. Let's pretend that Walmart bought 1 to 50s, or excuse me, bought 50 comics, and then they qualified to buy that. Let's pretend that. Well, that's not the only thing was happening. In fact, I talked to Dennis Barger from Wonder World Comics last night, and he says, well, some of his retailer exclusive comics, right? So a retailer exclusive comics is sometimes a retailer will get the opportunity to have their own special cover, right? So they've got to buy like 3,500 freaking comics, and then
Yeah.
you know they'll get their own like other stuff, right? So
Yeah, I've seen
go
like
to 3,500.
Midtown Comics has done that a bunch. They have like their own
Mhm.
covers. Yeah.
Well, some of his retailer exclusives. Remember, he got his 3,500, but apparently other comics of his were showing up in some of these Walmart packs.
Really? Okay.
Mhm.
So where originally I'm thinking that they put those incentive variants in the Walmart packs just to kind of create some buzz. Now it looks like they're kind of screwing the retailers over a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, so we're still waiting for comment from somebody, whether it be Diamond. Diamond says, "Well, it wasn't us." Okay, well, it's got to be somebody, or waiting for comment from Marvel or whoever. But of course, Marvel doesn't have to say shit, and that's fine.
Hmm. Interesting.
But these real retailers that are doing these exclusives, they need to be aware. Like, okay, you've paid for this much, and some of your stuff may end up in some of these Walmart packs for the cheap, and you're
Wow.
not getting compensated.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nope.
Oh.
Well, that's all I got, man.
That's all you got. That's all I got. So hey, show up next episode. It'll be the last summer episode of No Prize Podcast,
Ooh,
and we
summer's
will.
already over. Jesus.
Unfortunately, it's gonna this maybe it'll be our back to school episode because I know that my daughter will be going back to school in a couple of weeks, and she's not
Oh,
looking forward to it. And back to in school learning, after a year and
after
a
over a
half.
year.
So we'll
Oof.
see. So, all right. So, thanks for joining us today. I hope we gave you some good tidbits of info, what to be looking for, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Hasta la vista. as I look for the outro. Ah, there we go.